So what we want to do now is we want to actually perform a segue. So when we click on a cell, we then want to go to a new view controller. And that's what we're going to set up. So we're going to transition to a new view controller. In order to do this, we already have a view controller already set up that came with the first Xcode. What I want to do is click on my navigation and my table view controller here. And let's click on that yellow item, and we want to perform a segue. So I'm going to right click, or you can control drag, and just point it to your view controller and let go. And we've done this a couple times in class, and let's just click show. And we're set up. And if I click on this view controller, this yellow icon, you can give it a title. So it's always a good idea to give it a title so you know what, especially if you have multiple. But we just have one, but I'm going to name it anyway. I'm just going to call this items. And what's important, table views are a little bit different as far as when we actually select things. We actually have to perform and tie our segue into the code. And this is going to help us out when we have multiple items like we kind of have on our page. So let's click on the segue icon here. And what we need to do is give this an identifier. And that's how pretty much Xcode will be able to identify this segue. And you can name this whatever you want. So if you click here and you come to the attributes inspector, I'm just going to call this one show detail. You can name this whatever you want. You just have to remember the name that you're doing it. Just like we did an identifier for our cell, you have to remember that name because we're going to have to use it in the code sheet. So we got that set up. So let's go to our table view controller. That's with. And I want you to scroll down to the bottom. And what you'll find is that Xcode has done some work here and has set up sort of this navigation for us. So what I want to do is just make sure I delete the comments because we're going to need this. Okay, great. And I'm just going to come right above this function. So come right here. You can just hit enter a couple times. And what we want to do is define a method. And a method is simply an action. And this action is going to be triggered when we select an item in our table view. So that's what this method is for. And what this is called, it's called table view did select row. So I'm just going to type table view. And you should see it. And here it is. It says table view did select row index path at index path. And let's double click on that. Okay. Now, what this is looking for is it's going to actually, this is where we put in our code, and that was the identifier. And if you remember, my identifier was show detail. So what we want to do is let's come in, and I'm going to say perform. And what we want is this perform segue with identifier. Sometimes you have to kind of search and look for it, but there it is. Once I type perform, you can see perform segue with identifier. Let's click on that. And the string here, this is going to be your identifier. So this is going to be show detail. And it is case sensitive. And the sender, we'll just, since we only have one, we're just going to make this nil. All right. So what we have done is we now should have this set up where we had to create sort of a method where did select that index path, perform the segue, and we show the detail. So let's hit play and see if this has worked. So if I click on my item, okay, it goes back. Click here, goes back. Click here, goes back. So now we have set up our navigation item.